I'm at the top of Independence Palace right now. And wow, does this site have a lot of history. I'm gonna go backwards. So in 1975, in April, a North Vietnamese tank crashed through that gate right there. And that was the end of the Vietnam War. That was the fall of Saigon. South Vietnam had been defeated, North Vietnam won, and the country was reunified. Previously it was separated. The North was communist, the South was not. 17th parallel roughly was where it was separated. So prior to that, this had a bunch of different purposes, this current site. This complex wasn't complete until 1963, and prior to that it had undergone some significant events. The Prime Minister Ho Chi Minh had really lost the support of the Southern Vietnamese. He'd gone to incredible lengths to oppress the Buddhist population, which, you know, anywhere from 70 to 80% of this country's Buddhist. He was Roman Catholic. He had only elected other Roman Catholic officials. It was hard to even do anything, gain office or do anything relevant in the country if you weren't Roman Catholic. So it's safe to say his popularity was significantly deteriorating. So in 1962, two pilots, they were on a mission to bomb the Viet Cong, that's the North Vietnamese army. They defected from that mission and they came and they dropped bombs on this palace, right? Not this current structure I'm in, it was rebuilt. Their pictures are on the first floor of this palace. They're regarded as heroes, people that defected against the South Vietnamese and the regime that was oppressing the country. It's an interesting part of history to celebrate. I would say that in the United States we would do that differently, like we would tell that story differently. It still has, this country still glorifies the rebel spirit. Ho Chi Minh was seen as a revolutionary. He's seen as someone on par with Che Guevara. So that was 1962. There was an assassination attempt on Ho Chi Minh. He had to move, seeing that he was, you know, truly under siege. He moved to Jialong Palace, and eventually even he was assassinated, not there specifically, but that palace was attacked. And he escaped through a tunnel. He had a series of tunnels in the first district, and they eventually caught him and assassinated him and his brother a couple days later. His brother's wife, though, was probably the most evil of all of them, which I can probably talk about later. Anyway, but before that, this site was occupied briefly from March to September of 1945 by the Japanese. So they successfully defeated the French during World War II, and they occupied this site too. But prior to that, it was finished, I don't think it was fully completed until 1873. It was the residence of the Cochinchina Governor General in 1871. And then starting, I think, in the 1880s until 1945, it was the residence of all governors general of Indochina. So that was, you know, Cambodia, Laos, the different territories and stuff too. So this was their home and their offices to keep them safe. So anyway, but before that, when it was just being set up as a colony, as a protectorate, this was the citadel. So the military cemetery that I was at earlier is only a few blocks from here. So this was the citadel, and this was just, you know, it wasn't a huge palace like it was built to be, but, you know, when they laid the first stone, it had some Napoleon effigies there. It was called Norodom Palace for quite a while. That was the palace that was bombed in 1962, like I was speaking of. That was the Cambodian king it was named after. So anyway, a lot of history here, a lot of violent history. An assassination attempt, a tank crashing through the gates, not too far in the past either. So coming to a place like this and reading about it on the internet is one thing. Coming and actually being here is quite another, because the Vietnam War, it has huge ties to the United States. You know, I'm American, and you know, I had family members that fought in it. It was a huge loss of life, and it shaped a lot of the culture in our country that still survives today. You know, a lot of the 60s and 70s, the hippie generation, the anti-war sect, is still popular today, because that was the war that we fought, and we didn't know what we were doing. You know, it wasn't a war against Hitler and, you know, the Eastern Bloc countries, the countries that wanted to have one race. It was a war, and we didn't know exactly what we were doing, yet we had people going over there dying terrible ways. And you know, there was chemical warfare, Agent Orange, there was all sorts of different modified warfare that was brutal and just terrible. So anyway, still here today, and they have a poster, you know, information about the guys that bombed it. In the War Remnants Museum, they speak about how the American imperialists and were not seen as good here. The country, though, couldn't be more accepting of Americans, though. You know, they're able to turn the page and look past it, because, you know, prior to us, the French were here. And, you know, there's French people here now. There's French still written here. Prior to that, it was the Chinese. The Chinese dominated this country for 1,000 years. Their cooking, their food is still influencing here. You know, there's Chinese food, Vietnamese style, you can get almost everywhere. There's a Chinatown here in Ho Chi Minh City. So I couldn't be more impressed with the Vietnamese for being very understanding. I know growing up, relative to Americans thought Germans weren't considered good. You know, my grandfather, and I had other, you know, friends of his that were World War II veterans. Obviously, if they had perished, I wouldn't be standing here. You know, if they would have known that I traveled to Germany, or if I had eaten German food or liked German culture, that probably wouldn't have been so nice, because I was only born 40 years after 1945. I was only born 10 years after the tank crashing through that gate. 10 years goes by like that. You know, I can think, it's 2022. I can think back to 2002 like it was nothing, and remember vivid memories of that time. That's double the amount of time it was from that event to my birth. So not so long in the past.